All right, so I'm here with Alda Dobbs, Alda P. Dobbs, the author of this gorgeous book that
Oh,
I have so enjoyed, and I think everyone should enjoy. So we're just going to chat today a little bit about like books and writing and the inspiration for writing. So welcome, thank you for being here.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Maria. I appreciate this. I met Maria, when was it, about a year ago or more?
Oh,
No,
I guess,
probably longer.
yeah, a little over, yeah.
It's been longer and serendipity, I think that's fate brought us together. And well, I saw her name and I found out who she was, and I wanted to email her, see if she could join a panel because I thought her book, Love in English, is just a beautiful book. And I said, maybe I could form a panel with her and other authors, but you were the first one I thought about getting in the group.
Aw.
And I said, but how do I approach her? Because I'm a new author, I'm a debut author. Nobody knows who I am at all. And I said, maybe she'll ignore my email or something like that. So should I do this or not? I was really nervous, and I kept
Aw.
reading the email back and forth, and saying, okay, is this good? Is this good? And finally I said, okay, I'm sending it. That's it. I hit send. And she responded. I was like, oh my God, she responded, And yeah, the rest is history. We
Yeah.
connected, and I feel so grateful that she responded and that we connected.
No, I feel so grateful. I was going to say, I was going to jump in when you said fate intervened. I was like, no, fate had nothing to do with it. It was all you, lady. You sent that email, which is not a thing that people always do. This kind of like jump into the void, like I don't know you, but it would be cool to know you. And I think that speaks to a lot about you. And kind of fast forward, we've done what, at least 5 panels now together. We've
Oh,
done
it's
like
bad.
that.
I think, yeah, it seems like a lot,
Seems
but
like a lot.
this whole group, it's Maria, Daniel Aoman, Margie Longoria, Margarita Longoria, and Payal Doshi. And it's like, we just love each other, and
You
it's
do.
such a
I
close,
know.
connected group. I love it. And I feel so lucky that we're all together, and all
Yeah.
these panels, and we were known, and people usually pick us out. They're like, oh, if you like this book, you'll like these other 4.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool because we have very different experiences in some ways, but also a lot of like commonalities about in our experiences and in what we like to write about and stuff. So that's what made me think, I love our panels, and I hope we do but gajillion more. But also more of this one-on-one experience of like really, first of all, more one-on-one, and second of all, you're always the one asking the questions. So I kind of wanted to like flip that around and a little bit and have you be the one answering the questions.
That's great.
So yeah, so I just want to talk about writing and life and inspiration and kind of the big picture of what it matters and all of that. So I guess one of the first questions I want to ask you about, I think it's relevant kind of now currently, and I'm reminded of it because of the story that you told about just sending out a blind email to someone you hadn't met yet, is the writing life can be somewhat solitary. It's like you sit in a room and you like make up stories and you hope that 5 years from now someone will send you an email and tell you they liked it. And so one, do you feel that? Because not everybody necessarily feels that. And two, if you do feel that, like what are some of the things that you do to kind of work with that, to like feel connected even while you're doing this kind of solitary job?
Yeah, that's a great point, because since I can remember, I got my first official job when I was 16, and I've always liked coworkers and hanging out with coworkers, chatting and catching up, saying bye, saying hello,
Yeah.
and I miss that. I miss that because for the longest time, I had a job where I would go to and clock in, or check in with the boss or stuff like that. And this is the first time when I'm writing, and it's quiet, it's all alone. And so what I do is I go to public places. Sometimes I go to Starbucks, I go to coffee shops, I go
Yeah.
to the library, just to see people, just to feel that warmthness of hearing conversations and whatnot. And I try to befriend people. I try to go to the same coffee shop so that I can, learn people's faces, and they can say hi to me when they recognize me. It feels really good when they say, "Hey, Alda, here's your drink." I was like, "Oh, they know my name." Really grateful. And,
I exist. So
exactly.
that's interesting. And are you starting to get back to in-person events? Remind me.
I'm starting to, yes,
Yeah.
I've been very lucky. Last year I started and it was in San Antonio. San Antonio felt comfortable. We were wearing masks and I had to keep a distance from the kids, but they were allowing that. And oh yeah, it's amazing when you're there in person. It's just,
Yeah.
you feel that energy from the kids and it's just invigorating. I love it.
Yeah, I just recently did my first in-person school visit in over 2 years, and it's that feeling. I mean, I think writing in general, for me anyway, is so rewarding because you have ideas and you get to like coalesce them into pages. But writing for kids in particular, and then getting to talk to them about it, like if I'm ever despairing about the future of the world or anything, if I go talk to some kids, it's like, oh, they're gonna be good. This is gonna be
Yeah.
good, so it's nice.
Exactly. Yeah, I get that feeling too. And I've always liked being around young readers and all that. Just getting their feedback, their input, and the way they view the world is so unique. And I love that. I love peeking into those minds and getting a sense of how it is and how it's going to be in the future. And like you said, it doesn't look as dark. Sometimes
Yeah.
we tend to believe, they're pretty smart and resilient and they're just capable of so much. And I guess that's what energizes us when we go to these schools.
I totally agree. Yeah. And like a lot of the things that I think we consider big cultural problems now, like disinformation or like the handling social media and how it's intruding on our life, you talk to young people and they're just savvy about it, like they're already figuring it out since they've grown up with it always around. They're figuring it out in ways I think that maybe people in our generation are still like, whoa. Um, so that makes me hopeful. All right, I'm going to shift into this question I had been thinking about in my own career. And so, when you're thinking about a thing for yourself, you want to know how other people are thinking about it. Because I have found until this point, I'm very like, what's the next step, right? Like I wrote this one book and I just want to, write and publish the next book. And then I wrote this one. But at a certain point, I want to step back and think like, okay, like I don't mean to make it sound too pretentious, like body of work, but you look back and you're like, if you could, be 20 years in the future or something and look back at a trend in the work that you've put out or in the decisions that you've made creatively or career wise or something, like if you could have kind of like a magic wand and create exactly what you would want to see 20 years from now, do you think in those terms, like what do you want your whole like collection of work to be, or are you still kind of thinking about like next project, I'll worry about 20 years from now, 20 years from now kind of a thing? Like what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, I do like I'm a planner. Even in my story, I always write down outlines. I like to know what's at the end. And so I could work backwards sometimes. It helps me. Or even in scenes, I know what I want that scene to accomplish. And I work backwards to get to that point. So I tend to think like this. So yeah, I do have, I guess visions or desires that I hope, to accomplish and be able to look back. And right now I only have one book published. I have another one coming up this year, but I'm hoping to have more by then, hopefully 20 years from now. And yeah, I know, right? But
I mean, you're putting out one a year. You're gonna be sitting pretty 20 years
we'll see, hopefully. But yeah, I'm hoping that my books could make young readers connect each other, in terms of not I want my books to say, okay, this happened to this character and I identify with this character because I too went through the same thing, or my family went through the same thing, or I know somebody that went through that. So I'm hoping that my books will be able to do that, the stories, be able to connect people. Because I think once we connect, there's that connection, we empathize a lot easier. And it brings us together, which I think we desperately need right now. We need people to come together and be in harmony. We need that more than ever. And I'm hoping that's what books do. And if I could contribute to that, it'd be humbling, to do that. So that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, totally. Actually, that dovetails into another question I was thinking about talking to you, like, what is something, in a way you've answered it, but if you want to say more about it, like what is something that you think would benefit humanity if we like just understood this one thing about each other? You know, like what is one thing that you think is dividing us that if we just understood, then maybe the world would be more peaceful or harmonious? And that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, and how can books help with that? You know, like what is the role of books in making the human experience better?
Yeah, I think it's connections, being able to connect yourself and realize that you're a part of a bigger picture, you know, the world of humanity, of a collective. And it's because otherwise we focus too much on ourselves and make it about ourselves. And I think it should be about everyone, you know, about everything. And it reminds me like that one kid that asked me a question about rejection in writing. How do you get over rejection? And I thought about it for a second, but I said, well, you learn not to take it personal. It's not about you. You know, they're criticizing your work and it's something you can improve. Same thing here, you know, these works, you know, make us look beyond ourselves. It's not about us, you know, it's about, you know, the humanity. It's not about the individual, it's about the collective, you know, about how we're connected to other cultures, to other worlds, to other times, you know, to the past and even the future. Yeah. And that connection is what I think brings us together, you know, to realize that it's a bigger picture, you know, beyond just the me, you know, the I, the self. You know, we gotta make it about all of us.
Yeah.
That's my point.
No, I think that's awesome. I think that's an important point. I may have to call you again to hear more about this rejection philosophy because I'm not sure if I'm there yet. But
I told him, I said it stinks. I mean, still to this day, you know, I hear it and I gotta set my mind that no, it's not about me. It's about the work. You know, just don't take it so personal. So that's something I gotta daily practice. You know, to tell myself.
I think it is a daily practice. I think you're absolutely right. All right. So in you and I doing all of these panels, you know, you kind of get, I was trying to come up with questions of things that we haven't talked about so much on these panels. And I have a confession and then a question based on that confession. One of the questions that we talk about very often on these panels is, what's a book that really inspired you? And your answer is always
Catcher in the Rye.
Catcher in the Rye. Your answer is always Catcher in the Rye. And so the confession here, which I have never said to you before, is that I was not a fan of Catcher in the Rye as a teenager, but I have not revisited it in the couple of years since I've been a teenager. I haven't revisited it in a long time. So it is not your job to convince me to revisit it, but if you so chose to convince me to revisit it, what would you say, resonated with you then, and like what's still relevant to readers today that you think makes it special?
I think what made it so magical for me is that I was so opposite to that main character. I was the extreme. I was the complete opposite, yet I identified with that male, you know, white kid living in the Northeast that's preppy and has money. And that was me. And that same strong angst, I had it in me. And I thought the world was against me. I'm 16, you know, I thought the world was against me and nobody liked me. And now I hated everything. So I felt that. And I thought it was just magical for someone to be able to create a character like that and put it in such a way that I was that character. So I think, I guess the second part of your question is about now in the present time, how I.
Yeah, I mean, talk it up. If I should revisit it again, not your job to make me revisit it. One of the most famous classics in the world. But I'm just curious, like because I really respect your opinion about a lot of things. So I want to see it through your eyes.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point too, because I read it at 16 and then I think I read it in college again, and I haven't read it since. So I'm curious to know, you know, has it changed now? Would I see it differently now? But because I'm curious, now you got me curious. I'm gonna go back.
I want to ruin the Catcher in the Rye for you. Like, what are you going to answer on the panel?
No, but I would say, you know, just, you know, I have that open mind about, you know, kind of get into that character's mind, but if you revisit it. But yeah, like you said, I can't, it's one of those books, because any story or book, I think, you know, some readers really gravitate to it and say yes. As I said, some readers just they don't understand it.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty about books, right? About stories, that you just put them out there and hopefully, you know, it'll resonate with people, but there's some people, not everybody's going to like your work. So
Not everybody likes the same thing. And I think, you know, that's something I always say when I get the rejection question is I say, think of the book that just you think is the biggest masterpiece ever, like the best thing you've ever read. That's just everything about it is perfect. And now go on one of the sites where reviews are posted and find the 1-star reviews of that book, The Catcher in the Rye, you know, A Handmaid's Tale. I mean, any classic that you that someone absolutely adored. There's a 1-star review of somebody who hated it,
yeah.
and like it's the same thing. It's not like that means that those books aren't good. It just means that taste is taste, right? So
Yeah, I mean, my confession to you, and hopefully this won't get too far, but the Harry Potter books, my daughter adores the Harry Potter books, and I love the writing. I think she's a great writer, but the stories don't, I don't know what it is about the stories that they're okay, they're all right, but I'm not as passionate as, you know, a lot of people are. Even my daughter, she just can't fathom that, you know, I'm not as passionate as her. And I said, it's great writing. I love her.
yeah, it's just taste, right? Yeah.
But just the story, you know, so yeah, to each his own, right?
Which actually makes me harken back to a question I meant to ask you when you talked about the 20-year plan, so to speak, is do you see yourself writing in other genres? Right now, your book is middle grade, right? And your follow-up is middle grade also?
The follow-up is middle grade, but I'm also cooking YA too on the side. You inspired me. Your YA inspired me so much, and it's also a romance YA.
Oh, are we getting like new information?
I'm like, okay, if I could do, let me try it. You know, let me give it a shot.
You could absolutely do it. So that's cool. So possibly YA. Any adults? Do you ever think about anything like that? Or
some stories that I'm trying to fit into YA, and I'm like, no, I don't know. So I gotta play with that around a little bit more, but I am passionate about that one YA. And then I do have picture books as well that I'm, you know, in my mind, kind of Spanish ones too, that are singing, literally singing to me. So maybe I'll put pen to paper and see what comes up.
That's super cool. I want to take a moment to ask you about, I think we have spoken and probably people have heard you talk in other interviews about the inspiration kind of for this story. And I want to hear you say a little bit about that, but I want to ask you about the woman. Petra Luna is based on your great grandmother?
It's inspired. One of the main events, because it takes place during the Mexican Revolution in 1913, and my great grandmother lived through it. But both my grandmother and my great grandmother were really, really poor. They lived in this extreme poverty. So a lot of their experiences, they were only 14 years apart. So a lot of their experiences, I have them in the book, just because, you know, they inspired me to put that view and those perspectives in the book. So some scenes were inspired by experiences my great grandmother lived, and others are from my grandmother. So it's both of them. And the character being very strong and resilient resembles more my grandmother, because my grandmother was really, really tough and really strong. And so was my great grandmother. But yeah, the stories and the things my grandmother accomplished is just amazing, you know, mind blowing.
Yeah. Okay. So I was going to ask you about if your great grandmother was here. Presumably, is your grandmother still with us?
My great grandmother, no. My grandmother as well. They both passed already.
But like, this is a beautiful honoring of them, right? And so it made me think. I think a lot more and more as I get older about the people who came before and what they made possible for me through the lives that they lived and the sacrifices that they made. And so in many ways, I think your great grandmother and your grandmother made this book possible, right? Like they lived these lives so that you could be living this life. So I guess if there was a place, hopefully there's a place where one day you can sit and have a conversation with them and talk about that. Like, what would you say to them? What would you ask them? What was like a thing that as you were imagining their world, you wish you could ask them? Like, what would that sound like, that conversation?
Yeah, oh my goodness, just I would first of all just my hats off to them. I would say what you went through. I had heard the stories growing up, but it's not the same once you see the photographs and you really dive into the research. You learn so much more, and you hear so many stories, read so many interviews from back then that were done by reporters, and you realize how much suffering those people went through during that war and that poverty, those times of poverty. So I would say that, my hats off, and just that resiliency too, like where did it come from? I'm sure they got it from their ancestors as well. Because like you said, it's always how our past, what they went through and what they accomplished for us to have a better life. So we're always trying to push, to make it better, for future generations. And I would also say just thank you for those stories, because they're the ones who made sure those stories were passed on. They gave us the details, what it was like, and their experiences or joys or struggles. They passed all those on to us. And the way I see it, it's, when I was little, I used to, I heard of people leaving inheritance for their grandkids, these or trust funds and whatnot. And I always wondered, I'm like, oh my goodness, imagine, having a mansion, you're surprised to get all this money. And now that I wrote this book, I feel that that's my inheritance. All those stories were my inheritance.
That's your trust fund. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. I made it into a book, and I was able to accomplish a dream of being published. And it was their stories that they passed on and gave me, as an inheritance. Yeah. So to me, I'm so grateful for that.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, totally. You really feel that as you read it. It's like, a gift that was given, and a gift that you're being very like careful and gentle with. And no, it reads beautifully. And actually, leads into my next question, because so the phrase that kept coming up for me was world building, which is not necessarily a phrase that's always associated with historical fiction, because it's not like you're building a world, the world existed. But in the way that you chose your details and your examples, and the donkey that, the little sister names, and all of those things, like, it felt very much like you were building a world that I could step into, like I lived there. I felt it, all of the horrors and all of the difficulties. I was there. And so I guess I want you to talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you accomplish that? How hard is that? Is there a lot of research? Like, I have told you this offline, like you are one of the people who did the very best job of doing a social media campaign for your book that I've ever seen, because like you just would post pictures and be like, this is what it was like, this is what they would have been wearing, like these old beautiful classic pictures. So talk to me a little bit about how you built that world so masterfully.
Oh, thank you. I'm flattered. But I think research, the pictures helped a lot. And I have so many stories. For instance, they told me how they lived. They told me they described the huts that they lived in, how they looked on the outside, how they had no windows, and how they had a thatch roof made out of hay. They described the interior, no furniture at all, dirt floor. So these are stories I always imagined in my mind. And I had a vivid image of them. And when I started digging for these old photographs, and I came across photographs that matched what I envisioned, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is it. These are the houses. How could they be so well in the way they described them so easily? As I heard stories and compared them to photographs that I researched, I made a whole story. I'm like, this is it. All these stories now have an image to them. And even in the climax of the book, where they're crossing the bridge, during that, it took about a couple of years of research, but I found out somebody had a camera and actually snapped photographs of that moment, and to find those images. And again, exactly like the way the family story described them. So I was able to merge both of them, cross-reference everything, maps, photographs, stories, books, and create that world. And it helped too that I grew up in a lot of those places in Mexico, so I knew how the air felt in your skin, the desert air. I've walked barefoot in that type of rocks, and my feet aren't as tough as my grandmother's. I'm kind of, doing this a little dance because it's too, I have such weak feet, but yeah, I felt all that, so it was easier for me to put the sensory details into it. But a lot of it's just, yeah, the research, that the photographs and the stories, of course, because they described a lot of stuff really, really well. So they're masterful storytellers, that
Yeah.
they're able to pass that.
Yeah, I think that about my own people too. Again, very, very different background, but I think there is like people who grow up close to the land without a lot. I don't know, like I think one of the few entertainments that they have, like they can't afford opera tickets and like the fancy vacations or anything. So they sit together and tell each other stories, like I have so many memories of being a little girl and just kind of trying to stay quiet so the grown-ups wouldn't realize they were telling all the juicy stories around me.
Yeah,
And I think that really like goes through your bones. Like later when you become a writer and a storyteller, it's those times that you're drawing upon, I think.
That's true. Yeah, I remember being the same way, just staying quiet, because if I even beat or say anything, they'd send me away, and I'd be like, "What are you doing here?" So
like play under the table or something so that they didn't realize that you were around. Totally.
Exactly. Yeah, and I know a lot of stories that I bring up now. My mom says, "When did I tell you that? How did you find that out?"
I just know. That's all. Hey, so I want to switch gears a little bit here. There's like a mutual admiration society that I want to create an introduction for the very first time. I've mentioned this to you via email. I have this fantastic intern who like lives nearby me, and we got connected through common people who know each other, and she's been interning for me. This is her senior year in high school, and she's fantastic. And so smart. And one of the many things that she's doing is she's helping to put together my newsletter. And so I have to tell you, when she put together my first newsletter and sent it out, and I talked a little bit about like, this is my intern putting the newsletter together. You were the first person to email me and be like, oh my God, she's amazing. Yes. So I invited her to ask you a couple of questions. Is that okay with you?
Oh my goodness, I'm honored. Yeah, I remember seeing that email, that newsletter, and reading it, and I went back and said, did she say high school intern? I just couldn't wrap my mind around that writing. I mean, I said this, I thought this was a graduate student, so, oh my
We're goodness. Just saying nice things about you, Sophia.
Hi, Sophia, such an honor. Oh my Lord. Yeah.
Oh, the honor's all mine.
No, your writing is so excellent. I remember telling Maria over and over, I'm like, she's going to be working at the Post one day or the Times. I just see it, it's right there, so yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I don't know if you had already logged on when I was telling this part of the story, but when you sent the first newsletter that you did for me, Sophia, Alda was the first person to email and be like, "What? Where do you get an intern this awesome?" I was like, "Just lucky, yes." So as soon as I knew we were going to be doing this, I thought, oh, it'd be really cool if you both could chat for a little bit. And Sophia, I know you've prepared some questions, right?
Yep, I do have a few questions for you, if you don't mind.
Thank you. No, not at all.
So my first question is, so I read that you studied physics and you were an engineer before becoming an author. So what caused that big life path change?
Oh my goodness, great question. Yeah, because that seems like a lifetime ago now. But English wasn't my first language, it was Spanish. So I struggled to learn English. And then the teacher I had at the time wasn't as patient, as I wish he was. And he would get frustrated when I wasn't learning English. And that frustration, led to just backlash. And it was just created this atmosphere that I was just intimidated by English, and I feared English, and to the point that I didn't want to read English. I didn't like books in English just because I was so afraid of it and overwhelmed. But something I did like were stories. I was a big storyteller, and I love listening to stories, but I never made that connection. Nobody kind of made that bridge for me to say, hey, look, books or stories, and this is one way to help you learn English. And we start getting into the books, because at that point I refused to touch any books or read them. So I was a big reluctant reader. And like I told Maria, the story about finding Catcher in the Rye, that's the first book that I read. I was 16 already. And that's the first time that I said, you know what, I like this. I like this magic. I want to one day be able to create this, because I love storytelling. But again, English has always been a problem in my life. And
English is a problem.
And I could never understand it. And I was just, intimidated by it. And I always thought that if I wanted to be a writer, that my confidence would be there immediately. And it's not, it's a working process. You got to put in the work, you got to put in the time, and that confidence will come, eventually. I'm sure both of you know that, that it doesn't come right off the bat. Right. So I had to work, but at that point, I didn't know, I was too young, and I figured, math comes a little more natural to me, and the sciences. So let me study that. And what I realized with physics is that you use your imagination so much for physics, just because so many concepts are abstract. You have the cosmos, where you can't really explain what dark energy looks like. So you got to visualize it, or subatomic particles. You got to use your imagination to even explain the terms in the lecture. So I love that. I love the fact that you imagine all these things. So I really gravitated to that. And I ended up switching gears. I got my degree in physics, but switched gears to engineering, because at that time somebody told me that was the hottest market job right there. In hindsight, I should have stuck with physics, because I love physics a lot. You use your imagination a lot more. In engineering, I didn't feel like I was using my imagination as much. But I got the job in an engineering firm, worked there, and about 12 years ago, that's when my husband, he knew that I always wanted to be a writer, and he said, you know what, just do it now. Why wouldn't you just give it a shot, try it, maybe you might have something there. So, because I had so many stories floating in my head, and yeah, that's 12 years ago. That's when I said, okay, I'm gonna start writing, and that's it. I haven't been an engineer since, so I became a writer.
Wow. But I think that's an important lesson. If I can just jump in here, 12 years ago, you decided you were going to be a writer. Barefoot Dreams came out last year. Yeah. So that is not an unusual story at all. Like, I decided I wanted to be a writer eons ago, and my first book came out 8 years ago, but I've been trying for probably 15 years before that. So I think it's an important thing for people to hear stories like yours and mine, because it's not like you decide you're going to be a writer and the next day you have something out. Like, it can be a long journey, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Some kid at a school visit asked me, how do you apply to be a writer? Like, where do you apply? That's a great question. I never thought of it that way.
Well, you make a decision, and then 12 years later.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's a great question, Sophia.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like you even applied like physics in your writing too, which is really cool.
Yeah, no, I do think I do have a physics book in mind a little bit. So we'll see. Maybe I'll surprise somebody later.
Oh, cool. And so the second question I had was, so I guess a barefoot dream is like a dream that you think that wouldn't really go far. So what is something in your life, a dream in your life, that you thought was a barefoot dream, but actually turned out to be attainable?
Oh my goodness. I would say I have a lot of dreams like that, a lot of them. And I've been so blessed. It's amazing. I've been through a lot, and life has thrown so many curveballs my way, but at the same time, I've been given so many gifts that, it outweighs the darkness. So I'm just so grateful for that, for those gifts. And I would say, just for starters, the book, just being able to publish and tell a book, especially my family story, to me, that's a gift in itself. Getting my degrees, all the opportunities I've had, living in this country, in my family as well. So many things that I wish for, but I always felt like I had a little bit of doubt, as I try to work hard for them, but a lot of them came true. So yeah, I see them as barefoot dreams.
That's wonderful. That's really inspiring too. And then the last question I had was, what was like your purpose with Barefoot Dreams of Petra Luna? Like, what were you trying to what was your goal with publishing the book?
Yeah, I think particular to Barefoot Dreams, to that story, I think I wanted to show that the story is not unique to my family or to Petra Luna, that it's a universal story. It's a story of struggle, and especially of trying to come to this country or trying to escape violence, because so many people struggle for a better life for their children. So I was trying to put that in the novel so that people could connect to it and say, oh, my grandparents did that too. They migrated from this country to this country seeking a better life. or it just happened. My parents migrated here with me, and I wanted to make that connection to show that this is something that happens throughout history. For instance, right now, we see that happening in Eastern Europe, that, history repeats itself. So let young readers know that, look, there is an echoes of history, that history repeats itself, and be more aware of that as you grow up. And another thing too, I just want to be able to let kids know that, a lot of times as adults and grown-ups, we tend to treat kids like, oh no, you're just a kid, you can't do that, you're a kid. But kids are so resilient, so strong and powerful. And at 12 years old, you'd be amazed what kids could accomplish, whether they're in dire circumstances or not. Kids are just capable of so much. So I'm hoping the story will inspire kids like that too, that, hey, they could do that, and put in any situation, there will always be resilient, and we'll use good judgment and all that, not to feel so intimidated, or let grown-ups, like us, tell them, no, you can't do that, or no, you're limited, sorry, you're a kid, but so that's my goal, hopefully.
I think that definitely shows up in your work, that like inspiring story, and making kids today look kind of at their own immigration stories.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And because I get that from the articles I've read that you've posted through Maria's newsletter. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm just blown away. And I read them 2-3 times, and then I save them, because I'm like, oh, I have to reference this. It's just beautiful the way you write. And I think the impact you're going to have is going to be tremendous, and I mean, right now you have this tremendous impact already, and, you're in high school, and see what I mean? Again, kids that are just so wise and at their age, and it just gives me so much hope, for tomorrow.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me.
I have to say, my highest traffic posts whenever a newsletter goes out, always Sophia stuff. It's like, hey, which is as it should be. It's fantastic. So anybody who's watching this who hasn't been to my website, you can find them because they have her byline on there. So if you just search for her byline, her pieces will come up. And not to put you on the spot, Sophia. So I always worry about asking you this question, or other people, particularly young people, this question, because sometimes I worry, like, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Like, I'm a writer, so I think everybody should be a writer because it's the best thing ever that everyone should do. So I don't want you to feel like I'm like, so when will you become a writer, Sophia? Because I know that that's maybe not your path. But I do wonder, we've been together, working together since September now. So you've had some time to like look at the inner workings, and now you met Alda and stuff.
Yep.
Again, not like, so are you going to be a writer, but like, has this experience of being more kind of like on the inside done anything to your thinking about the written word? Or do you think that even if you don't become a writer, you'll go on to think of it in different ways? Like, what has your experience been like, just kind of thinking more critically about what it's like to be a writer, being around writers?
Yeah, well, I've always like played around with the idea of becoming an author, but I feel like working with you has made me like appreciate the profession a little bit more. It's kind of seen as like this independent work, but really you're working with your editor and your publisher and all these different companies. Like it's a lot more work than just like, sitting down at the table and writing for like a year or however much it takes. But I definitely have like a newfound appreciation for writing. And just writing for your newsletter it's been so much fun, honestly. Like, you can just like play around with anything that you're interested in, and other people find it interesting too. Like Alda having like said to me that she finds my works like so impressive just means so much to me. Like things like that you like it really just does build up your confidence, and that I feel like that would better equip me to become a writer. And so I've always had this idea of becoming a lawyer, just because I've played around with the idea of immigration law. Like in my school, I'm studying like humanities, and I've been writing like this short novel about my grandfather's immigration story. So like I've been playing around a lot with like immigration and history. But honestly, the most fun part about writing this book that I'm writing right now is just being able to like have my personality show through that book. So honestly, I think that my interests are kind of shifting a little bit from history to writing a little bit more, just because of all the practice that I've been doing. But yeah, I think that working with you and just doing things like this has just made me more inclined to becoming a writer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, I mean, that's something that I always talked about my intimidation with English, and I pursued my physics degree, then worked as an engineer. And looking back, I had always been a writer. You know, there was always proposals to write, reports to write, and no matter what you're writing, you're pitching a story. You're trying to deliver a message, and so you're always trying to put a spin into it, you know, into whatever you write. So I'm like, wait a minute, I've always been a writer. You know, so why was I so scared about it? So the same thing for you. You're going to be probably writing a lot as a lawyer. And I mean, and you see a lot of lawyers become writers, become novelists, really good novelists. And a lot of it's because of that. You know, you're pitching a story, you're reporting it, you're getting this information, the research, everything is pretty much in there. So, and as you gain experiences, whatever career field you choose, you know, you're just increasing your tools, your knowledge, your stories. And then, yeah, you know it in your heart when you feel like, okay, this is, I need to tell the stories, especially you, since you've been writing and you have that confidence. Yeah, you'll do great.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much.
I always think that too, and I hope I say it to you enough. Like, if it doesn't matter what path you choose, you're obviously going to be very successful. You have a very natural talent, which is very inspiring to see. But you can apply that talent in a lot of different fields, and whichever one you choose is going to be, you're going to do pretty awesome. So it's been really cool to be able to hang out. We've got a couple of months more. I really still, like, hats off that the senioritis has not kicked in and you still like show up to work on stuff all the time. So that's pretty cool.
It's tempting to fall into it, but
I must say, I do hope to see a novel one day with your name. I'll be the first one buying it. Well, probably not yet myself.
Yeah, we'll be blurbing it too. You'll reach out to us and ask us for blurbs.
of course.
We'll be like, we know her when. Yeah, all right, very cool. This has been so awesome. I'm so grateful that you both took the time to do this. Sophia will probably be the one doing the heavy lifting of putting this up on the site, and we'll have social media posts and all of that. So it's been so cool to spend this time with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Y'all take
Thank
care.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.